Hello, everybody. Welcome in. We're going to be breaking down week 5 of the college football slate. As always, at YonkersCFB on Twitter here to break down the full slate. That's what I do. I break down every single game, give you some target data, some snap data, basically just what I'm thinking in the game, the highest over-unders, that sort of thing. I do break down pretty much any player I think is going to be relevant. That's how I do things. I don't just hand out picks. So if you're new here, welcome in. This is just a free show meant to provide you information here and help you hopefully win some money on this slate. Yes, it'll be breaking down the DraftKings main slate on October 2nd. I was off last week. I had the flu or something. I don't know what was going on. I had a fever of 102. Couldn't keep down any food or water for a couple of days. So it was pretty nasty. So I couldn't get to the show last week. That being said, I am just much busier this year than I was last year. So not as many Thursday night breakdowns, Friday night breakdowns. I just don't have time for it, to be honest. I do have a full-time job, coach afterwards. I have multiple writing jobs writing about college football. I do have a podcast, and then there's this show after all that. So I'm keeping myself absolutely insanely busy. I'm recording this right now before 5 a.m. Because why am I still doing this show? I just think I think this information does need to be out there. I think there's a severe lack of this information, and I hope this helps you win. If you're trying to play NFL DFS or NBA DFS, anything else, there's just way too much information to possibly even filter. And in college football, there's almost none, especially none free content. So I just feel like this is one of the favorite things I do each and every week, and I do still want to get it out there, but I am very busy. So some weeks it might happen. I'm not going to get the flu every week, but I may not hit every single slate. All right. Other than that, PrizePicks, go ahead and sign up. I'll try to give out what I've played Thursday and Friday slates. Not a lot has dropped for Saturday yet, so not a lot of PrizePicks on this show. I am going to try to record a show. I'm going to try to do that Friday night or Thursday night if the lines drop. Just a quick show going over some of my PrizePicks, and I also do tweet those out. Been killing it in college football. They've had some good offerings. Anyway, that's promo code Yonke. That's YONKE, all caps. I'll put the link in the description. You get a 100% deposit match up to $100 if you are a first-time depositor. So might as well go get some free money if you're interested in playing PrizePicks. It's different than DraftKings or FanDuel, where you're competing against people in a prize pool. It's just you straight up against the projection. So if you like Tanner Mordecai over 18.5 fantasy points, which he was listed at in his first game, and he threw for 7 touchdowns, I think in the first half, but he had 7 touchdowns. So obviously going over that, right? And then last week he was listed at 24 and had over 40 points. So anyway, you get those kind of offerings in college football. Go ahead and use that promo code Yonke. One more thing, this is available in podcast-only format, audio-only podcast format, and that's under the Campus to Campus brand, Campus to Campus. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. I will also put the link in the description. All right, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. First game up on the board, we have Arkansas versus Georgia. I'm now officially an Arkansas fan. If you hadn't heard, went to the Arkansas-Texas game a few weeks ago. It was an absolute blast out in Fayetteville. I'm riding this bandwagon. I was there not even knowing they were going to beat Texas, and then obviously I didn't know they were going to beat Texas A&M. So whipping those Texas schools' asses are pretty cool. So I'm officially a fan. But does that mean I need to play them in DFS? No, it doesn't. This is a game you're not going to want very much ownership interest in. Arkansas is an 18.5 point underdog, and the over-under is listed at 48.5, which, yes, I do have a few shares of the under. So you can tell which way I'm leaning here. KJ Jefferson, big fan of him as a fantasy quarterback. Hope you played some last week. He was pretty much the cheapest quarterback on the slate, which made no sense because he's a very good rusher. But the issue is here, obviously, he's going against a Georgia defense that might be the best defense in the country. I think they probably are. We haven't seen them tested very much because apparently Clemson sucks. So we haven't seen them tested, but you're not really going to want to be playing Arkansas guys in this one. KJ Jefferson, he's also probable. Looks like they're saying he has some soreness, but he should be fine. I am still a little worried about that because it is in his knee, and he has a dual threat, so that's a little iffy. They have a bunch of good running backs, but they all rotate time. Don't play Traylon Smith. A.J. Green, yes, he did break a long touchdown last week, but when you go in and look at it, he only had 3 rushes, and those 3 rushes went for -2 yards. And yes, you're getting A.J. Green versus Georgia here. For a throwback. Rocket Sanders, Raheem Sanders, he's awesome at 3.2, but just doesn't get enough workload. Okay, the only receiver they use is Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks is amazing. He might be the best wide receiver in college football. He's in conversation with Drake London, Josh Downs. I don't know who else. Maybe Chris Olave. Maybe I'm missing somebody obvious, but he's certainly up there. He hasn't been healthy to start the year, but he finally is getting healthy the last 2 weeks. He had 127 yards and then 167 yards in his two most recent games. The injury is something that's kind of weird. Going into last week, I would have played more of him. I actually had him in a decent amount of lineups, and then I saw the news come out that he was going around. I think it was for charity. Maybe I have that wrong, but he was out and about for some event before last week's game, and he was spotted in a walking boot, which he hadn't been seen wearing since week 1. And they asked him, why are you wearing that walking boot? You okay to play? And he said, yeah, coach says I can't take it off. And they were taking photos. They're like, can you take off the boot for photos? And he said, no, I can't take off the boot. Coach says don't take off the boot. I think that was a game. I think that was gamesmanship. I could be wrong. Maybe he's just toughing it out because he was in a walking boot a few weeks before that. He looked way healthier than he's looked all season, and he had 167 receiving yards. So I think that was some gamesmanship. That being said, that means I don't really know what to trust with this team. I don't know what to trust them in their injury updates because clearly we see teams like Florida saying Anthony Richardson's going to play, and he doesn't play. I think you have another case of that here with Arkansas where who knows what to trust. Anytime you see Treylon Burks below 6K, you're going to have to at least be interested. He's by far the focal point of their offense. He wasn't in some of their earlier games, like against Texas. They just had a safety over the top every single play. But once that competition starts going up, he is going to be the focal point of their offense when they're not running the ball. So he has 30 targets on the team, and the next closest only has 11. So that gives you an idea. He's pretty talented. It's tough to get there this week. There's some good mid-range wide receiving options, but you have to mention him. All right. Georgia. Basically, the deal here with Arkansas's defense is they get three-man pressure better than any team I've seen in the last couple of years. If they can play drop 8, they're going to. They're going to sell out and stop the run, make Georgia throw the ball, and that's what I see happening here. They've done that pretty effectively with every team they faced, and Georgia hasn't been very good rushing the football. Now, they should still have an advantage because they're nasty, but I don't really expect Georgia to just pile on the rushing yards here. And I do think JT Daniels, if Arkansas, if their game plan, if it goes according to game plan, I think JT Daniels may be throwing a decent amount in this matchup. He doesn't really throw a lot when he doesn't need to, but we've seen they're trying to open up their offense. I think JT Daniels, again, I don't really have a ton of ownership with this over-under being so low, but I do think he's going to throw a decent amount. As far as who's he going to be throwing to, I think his options are a little too expensive. Brock Bowers leads the team with 21 targets. He's their tight end. Big news is Darnell Washington, this mammoth of a tight end. He's huge. He may play. It sounds like him and Tyke Smith. I think they're both expected back, which is big for Georgia. So that might drop Bowers just a tad. Other than that, Jermaine Burton is their best wide receiver. He's their most explosive wide receiver. I'm a huge fan of Jermaine Burton. The workload has not been great. Obviously, playing for this Georgia team, he's still managed some decent stat lines, but hasn't gone over 100 yards, and he's been kind of big play reliant. I think Jermaine Burton's okay. There's some better options in that range, but he's the only one I would look to. If you're playing any of these other guys, you can see all the questionable tags. It's just has not been consistent. All right, as far as running back, they rotate Zamir White, James Cook, McIntosh, and then they also do Kendall Milton as well. So I don't really see how you can play any of these guys on the slate. All right, Tennessee against Missouri. This is going to be a sneaky game. The over-under is at 65, and it's listed as a close matchup. Tennessee is a 2.5-point underdog. So anytime you see a game that's expected to be back and forth with that high of a game total, and two teams that, I mean, let's be honest, these teams aren't very good. I'm not a fan of either team. But that's fantasy goodness territory, right? So you're going to want to pick your spots in this game, I believe. Coffee time. All right, quarterback. Another team we can't trust. Tennessee said Joe Milton was going to be QB1 last week. Listed him first on the depth chart. And then they went with Hendon Hooker for the most part. Now they're both questionable. Apparently Milton was not healthy enough to play, even though they got him in there for a couple snaps. You guys know the book on Milton if you've been watching the show. Could not complete 50% of his passes in high school. Can't complete 50% of his passes anywhere he goes, and he is awful. He should not be starting. But he's really big, and he plays in a Josh Heupel offense that's fantasy friendly. So we don't know who's at quarterback. If I felt confident Hooker was going to be the number one guy, then I would be playing a decent amount of Hooker on this slate because he does run a lot. Both these quarterbacks do run a lot. I think Hooker is just better and more trustworthy. But it looks like they're both questionable, and we can't trust them on their injury updates. Tennessee has the fastest offense in the country. Kind of buried the lead here. The fastest snaps per 100 minutes in the entire country. So while this isn't a good team with Josh Heupel coming in over from UCF as their head coach, it really changes things. All right, so you shouldn't really stack, again, mobile quarterbacks and DFS. Number one mistake I see when people DM me lineups, how does this look? It's not the NFL. You don't need to stack all the time. If you have a throwing-only quarterback, you should probably stack, especially if he has one main guy he likes to target. But college is different. It's more high scoring. You don't need to stack for one. And then if the guy's a dual threat, that's the main reason you're playing quarterbacks in DFS usually is they're a dual threat. Not the only reason, but it's one main reason. It's one reason you see quarterbacks, if they're going up there in the 40s, point-wise on tournaments, it's probably because they're running the ball. And you don't really need to stack if they're running because A to B. All right, the wide receivers are a mess here. I really think we should have somebody to target, like I said, but they're a mess. So the leading wide receiver has 14 targets. That's Velus Jones at 4.7K. He also was coming off injury to start the year and is getting more and more healthy. He's also a deep threat. I think Velus Jones is definitely the best option at 4.7K. Other than that, Peyton has 13 targets, Tillman has 13, and then Warren, their tight end, all the way down at 3.3K. He has 13 targets as well. So you can see there it's kind of a mess and not a ton of targets for any of these guys, but they are relatively cheap if you wanted to play a one-off. Other guy, Callaway, has 12 targets on the year, I believe, at 3.3K. So, sure, if you really want to pick a cheap punt, you have some options there. The running backs are interesting. They're splitting time. Tyon Evans was one of the top JUCO running backs. He's at 6.2K. And then Jabari Small is at 4.4K. I think the pricing's off. I think most people will probably know the pricing's off. The workload's very similar. Again, both had 11 carries last week. Tyon Evans had a long receiving touchdown that really boosted his stat line. But, I mean, even Jabari Small had one catch, and he took it for 22 yards. So I think this is relatively even, especially Small was coming. He was a little injured there for a while, getting back up to speed. This is a terrible Missouri defense. Absolutely awful. They're allowing 6.4 yards per play. I don't think this team is very good without Phil Jurkovec as their quarterback, and yet still they beat this Missouri team, so I'm not a fan. But the rushing defense is what's especially brutal for Missouri. They're allowing 270 rushing yards per game, 270 on 6.2 yards per carry. So you're going to need some Tennessee running backs in your life, I believe. This is a very expensive slate. There's a lot of expensive prices out there. There's some high over-unders, and yet Tennessee, these running backs are cheap, so I think you're going to want some ownership interest here. I think Small is a very strong play. All right, Missouri. I played a lot of Basilak last week because Boston College is not good. Like I said, they're not good at all, and Basilak's throwing the ball 40 times a game pretty much, right? Look at there, 30, 50, 30, 40. That's fantasy goodness territory. He has not been very efficient. He decided to throw 2 interceptions. I thought I would have some nice leverage where everyone was playing Beatty, and I was going to be on Basilak. Didn't work out great, but again, this is a good matchup for him. Good tempo. You could do worse. I think at that range, there's guys like Desmond Ridder and just some more dual threat quarterbacks because Basilak doesn't run at all. But yeah. All right, Kiki Chisholm is their leading wide receiver. I had the misfortune of watching pretty much every snap of this team last week. I hope you didn't do that. I'm here to report on it because hopefully you didn't. It was a mess. But Kiki Chisholm's pretty good. He's definitely their number one guy. 5.2K, that's a fine price. All right, I was on Mookie Cooper last week. He was my minimum 3K play, and he was awful. Apparently, it looked like he was getting more and more healthy. He had 64 receiving yards the week before. And he didn't play at all. Apparently, he's dealing with a foot injury. Would have been nice to know that. He was not as healthy as he was the week before, but can't trust this team with their injury updates either. So I'm not trusting Cooper, and the rest of these guys are a mess and are going to rotate. Levet, I think, would be the strongest of the cheaper options. They also went to Bannister more, playing out of the slot last week. I think is a decent punt option as well. So I think Bannister and Lovett. I guess Bannister's cheaper. He would be the guy I would look at behind Chisholm. All right, bearing the lead here. Their running back, Tyler Batty, is their entire offense at 8.2K. I think he's fine. The rushing offense has not been as good as you would originally think if you look at his fantasy points per game and sees over 30 points per game. He feasted on a bad Central Michigan defense week 1, and he hasn't gotten over 81 rushing yards since then. And he's had some favorable matchups. That Kentucky defense isn't good. Southeastern Missouri obviously isn't good, although it's a blowout. And then Boston College is not good. He does get a ton of receiving work is the thing. He has 25 targets. It's between him and Chisholm as the top receiver. So Beatty's fine. They're probably going to score a lot, and he is their best offensive option. Once you're up there in that price range, he's a similar price to Bijan Robinson. It's a little hard to talk yourself into that, but maybe you would get some leverage playing Batty over Bijan. All right, Michigan versus, well, skipped one. Who did I skip? Texas versus TCU. Okay, so Texas, thank God, they finally made the switch over to Casey Thompson. First things first, Texas, 5-point favorites, 65.5 total, so another high total game here. Thank God they made the switch to Casey Thompson. I don't understand. He doesn't have a lot of fans on the whole Twitter analyst sphere, which I guess I am a part of. I don't know why he doesn't have fans. He's better than Hudson Card as of this point in time. Yes, again, I hate to keep speaking anecdotally, but I was at that Texas-Arkansas game. I had to watch every snap of that game from Texas offensively, and yes, had to, because woeful, terrible, dreadful stuff when Hudson Card was on the field, which was pretty much all game. Looked like a wide receiver trying to play quarterback. Did not look ready to be in that road environment. Just didn't look ready in general. He looked fine against bad teams, and against group of 5 teams, he'll look fine. But Casey Thompson immediately came in there, and there were guys open. There were plays to be had, and immediately Casey Thompson came in for, I think he was in for 2 drives and led 2 touchdowns. Immediately made those plays. Pretty good dual threat, very quick decision maker. It's just night and day the decision making he makes over Hudson Card. And then last week he had 7 touchdowns against Texas Tech. So thank God they finally went with Casey Thompson, like I've been clamoring for. At 8.4K, it's a little expensive. The volume isn't fantastic from the Texas quarterback. From what we've seen, year 1 under Sark, you can see there 23 pass attempts last week, but still managed 6 touchdowns. Gave him an extra one there. So with that dual threat ability, high game total, you have to have interest, but I would like to see more volume personally before I trust him. Again, don't need to stack dual threats, but I do think they have a few interesting wide receivers. Jordan Whittington is the target leader at 25. I'm a huge Jordan Whittington fan. Running back, wide receiver hybrid. He dropped a long catch or 2, dropped a touchdown in the Arkansas game. Otherwise, his stats would be better. But it looks like they're going to target Worthy more and more here. Very talented freshman, Xavier Worthy. He has 20 targets on the year. But in the last 2 weeks, Worthy has 14 targets and Whittington has 9. Does that warrant Worthy being more expensive than Whittington? I personally don't think so. I think they should be about the same price, whatever it is. I do think Whittington's a little too cheap. I will have some Whittington on this slate. Do I love him? Like I said, not super trustworthy. Has dropped some passes, and we've seen since Casey Thompson has been in there those last 2 weeks, he's been targeting Worthy more and more. So I think either guy is fine. Either guy has breakaway touchdown speed. Bijan Robinson. Not much to say here. 8.7K. He's an absolute beast. If you can pay up for him, do it. Hopefully they start using him more in the receiving game. We see any time they have. He's been extremely efficient in Louisiana games and Texas Tech games. Has 3 100-yard receiving games, or rushing games, has 100 yards rushing in every game other than Arkansas. And this TCU defense, they're allowing 6.7 yards per play. I think Gary Patterson, their head coach, is washed. I said before the season started that if they struggled this year, which I think they could, and it looks like they might be, having barely squeaked out a win over Cal and then getting upset by SMU, and it wasn't a particularly close game last week. I did say I think he might get fired before too long, which I know sounds ridiculous. He's been there forever. It's probably going to be a mutually parting ways if he keeps continuing down this path, but it's just getting a little ugly. He's supposed to be a defensive guy, and the defense has really, really slipped, and they don't seem to have much answers. So could TCU turn it around here? Yeah, they could. I mean, TCU versus Texas, we've seen some really weird games. I do think these teams are pretty comparable, where they have some athletes that could really score, and it's a high over-under total, but you just don't really trust either side, don't really trust either defense. sure, they could come out here and win, and it could be all over because Texas is not in the team where you really trust them yet, right? I think they're definitely the more talented team, but you just can't trust them. All right, anyway. TCU, yeah, Max Duggan, they're pricing him way too expensive. He was too cheap for a number of years with that rushing upside. It was never a guy you could trust. Never threw the ball a ton, but you could hope that he would run for 2 or 3 scores. That's pretty much what you're relying on with Max Duggan. Now that he's been in college for a million years, he's a little more trustworthy. The offense is looking a little better, but at $9K, that's pretty expensive, man. You got some other better quarterbacks on the slate. Just pay for Matt Corral, in my opinion. But if you're playing 150 lineups, you're probably going to want some stacks at this game. So his top target getter is Quentin Johnston. This guy's really good, sophomore, 6.8K. Has 21 targets on the year. Again, they're not really one to feed their wide receivers, but he's pretty clearly Duggan's number one guy at 6.8K. He's kind of a deep threat. Could he catch multiple touchdowns? Sure, he could. All right. So when Texas was playing Arkansas, their defense, Arkansas just ran the ball down their throats, just relentlessly. I don't think TCU is that team. I don't really know if they're going to be able to do that. But could they have some rushing success? Sure, they could. Zach Evans, running back, 7.4K, 5-star sophomore running back, or I guess second-year running back. The eligibility is all messed up this year. Back-to-back 100-yard rushing games, and also had 70 yards receiving and a touchdown last week. I hope he played him last week. He was way too cheap. He was 6.2K. I hope you played him. I did. My lineup still were not great, but hopefully you played Evans. He's okay at 7.4K. Obviously, the huge price jump in a matchup that I think is a little bit tougher. Not much tougher, but I think Texas's defense is probably better than SMU's. I'm not sure you need a ton of Evans. They have some guys behind him who play, but none who's shown enough to really play, in my opinion. All right, Michigan, Wisconsin. This should be quick. I think I'm going to need some coffee for this one. All right, this one should be fairly quick. This game is really ugly, okay, folks? Wisconsin allowed 41 points to Notre Dame last week, but that's really misleading if you watch that game or you look at the box score. Notre Dame had 31 points in the fourth quarter, and I think there were 2 pick sixes in there. Graham Mertz just totally imploded. He went full Matt Schaub. He didn't realize it wasn't the end of October. I think he thought it was Halloween time, and he was trying to be Matt Schaub, throwing a pick six every play. But yeah, so that score is misleading. 2 really good defenses. It's a Big Ten game, and this is classic Big Ten right here. Cade McNamara can't score against bad teams, so I don't know why you trust him here. I don't know why you would stack him. I think if you really need a punt, their tight end probably shouldn't be min-priced. Eric All is okay. Gets targeted a couple times a game. Apparently he gets 23 receiving yards every game, so if you're punting him, you're hoping for 23 receiving yards, except this time a touchdown. Okay, running backs. Yeah, Blake Corum's too expensive. Hassan Haskins is too expensive. I unfortunately switched out to Corum. I was going to fade him last week because he just doesn't see... I guess he saw 21 carries. People just all of a sudden think he's Jesus because he played Western Michigan and Northern Illinois, 2 MAC teams, and put up 230 burgers, because of course he did. And then he did have a really nice game against Washington. And I'm a Blake Corum fan. I think he's really good. I did play him some week 1 against Western Michigan, but he was, like 3.6K in that matchup? Now he's all the way up at 7.6K. It's a huge price jump. He is going to split some carries a little bit with Haskins. Against this Wisconsin defense that just held Kyron Williams to, 3.9 fantasy points. I don't really see why you would get to either one of these guys. Okay. Wisconsin. Graham Mertz totally imploded, averaging 5.2 points per game. Play him if you want to. I don't know why you would. Other than that, the receivers, only guy I would consider playing is Jake Ferguson, their tight end, at 3.8K. Does have 18 targets in 3 games, so he's averaging 6 targets a game at 3.8K. Only way I would look in this matchup would be the tight end at the pass catcher. All right, Chaz Malusi, Clemson transfer at running back. I bet Clemson's wishing they still had this guy. He's pretty good. Had 18 carries last week. I played him last week and was very disappointed. I just thought as a cheaper running back option, when there were so many running back options, I would go with him and Evans in that similar price range. Evans came through. Malusi did not. They were shut down by Notre Dame. Notre Dame's defense did look better, but this Wisconsin offense just doesn't have answers. Like, if they load the box against Malusi, they're just not. They're still a good rushing team, but they're not like elite enough like they have been in past years to just keep running the ball for 5-6 yards a pop against an 8-man box. So I think Malusi's okay. He's going to see a good workload. Berger and Garendo are going to be on the field, but mostly in passing situations. Not really a threat to his workload as of this point in time, I think. Although I will say Berger looked a little bit more explosive than Malusi when he was on the field last week. Had me a little bit concerned. But I think Berger only had like one carry. Yeah, one carry and one reception. So they both went for 8 yards. Probably should have given him to him more. That made me a little nervous. But yeah, shouldn't have a ton from that game. All right, Louisville-Wake. Yeah, another total over 60. 61.5. Louisville is a 7-point underdog. All right. The artist formerly known as McHale at quarterback for Louisville. Malik Cunningham. Yes, changed his name to Malik from McHale. I think I say his name wrong every time. I had to write myself a note. I think I still call him McHale when I mention him in casual conversation, which I don't know how many people I'm having a casual conversation with about McHale Cunningham. So Malik, oh my God, Malik Cunningham. So I guess just in my head when I'm talking to myself. But anyway, yeah, he's been a monster this year. I don't really know if you can trust his profile. It reminds me a lot of Desmond Ridder last year, where, I mean, the passing volume wasn't great, but he was running a ton. He's run for 2 touchdowns in every single game so far this year. It just seems unsustainable, but like Ridder just kept popping off 30-point games, and I kept not playing him at points last year, so he does kind of remind me of Desmond Ridder. 9.5K, that's really expensive. Like, what if he doesn't rush for 2 touchdowns this week, you know? But that being said, he does have double-digit rushing attempts every single game. I don't know. Is he going to finish with 24 rushing touchdowns this year? Because that's what he's on pace to do, and that's what you probably need to think if you're going to play him in this spot. I don't think so, but I think he is going to have a monster year. I wouldn't be surprised if he had 18 rushing touchdowns and like 1,000 rushing yards. So yeah, don't stack him. Like I said, he's a dual threat. Don't stack him. I would say Ford, their tight end's really been impressing me. He leads the team with 25 targets. It looks really good. Had a 100-yard receiving game against UCF, and then last week 52 receiving yards. 4.7K. I think I would want him to be a little cheaper, but he's okay. The wide receivers are a mess. Jordan Watkins is probably their go-to guy, but that doesn't mean much in this offense. Braden Smith's out. So behind him, we're looking at Huggins, Bruce, and Marshall. Huggins, Bruce had one huge game, really teased us. Then it played him next week against UCF. He had 1 catch for 5 yards. It looked like he did nothing last week. He could step up with Braden Smith out, I guess, but haven't really seen it. Other than that, Justin Marshall, I think, is a fine cheap play, but it's really low. He only has over 10 points once, so Justin Marshall's at 3.4K. Huggins, Bruce, 3.7. All right, running back Jalen Mitchell. I feel like there's some hidden potential here with Jalen Mitchell at 5.1K. Am I going to get there this week? I'm not really sure I'm going to. His yards per rush has been really low this year. And Malik, I got it right. Malik's been he's been vulturing all the touchdowns. But this is still an offense that really likes to feed that RB1 guy. When Javian Hawkins came out of nowhere a few years ago, you really had to realize if they're going to feed a guy like Javian Hawkins, who was tiny, and I think he was a freshman when they started feeding him, this is clearly an offense that wants to do that. Jalen Mitchell's really taken over the workload, but again, it just hasn't been efficient at 5.1K. I guess you could get there. There's multiple concerns. This Wake defense has looked really good, but they haven't played anybody. They did hold Virginia to 17 points last week, which was very impressive. But Virginia can't run the ball at all. Louisville can. I think Mitchell, if you're playing 150 lineups, you should have some Mitchell. If you're just playing 1 or 2, I don't really know if you need to get there with Mitchell. All right, Wake Forest. I don't really know how I feel about Wake Forest and DFS. They're a tough team for me because they clearly have a good offense, but they are balanced and they do kind of spread the ball around. So I don't know how I feel. I also don't know how I feel about Sam Hartman. I really like him. I know everyone was just dunking on him all over Twitter last year. I think Sam Hartman's fine. I think he looks pretty good this year. The issue here from a DFS standpoint is that the volume's not there, just like with a lot of these guys on the slate. You have to chase volume. Volume's king in fantasy. Has only 30 passing attempts once this year, and that was 31. So it's a good offense. They're probably going to score. I don't really know what the ceiling is because he doesn't rush a ton either. You could see him stumbling into a rushing touchdown here or there. I think if you're playing him, yeah, he does run a little bit. I think you're relying on a rushing touchdown and maybe 3 passing touchdowns, which with this high of an over-under is certainly within play. I think Hartman's fine. But this team has also shown if they can run the ball, they're just going to do that and not throw. Is that possible here against Louisville? It is. Again, I just kind of view this game as a little volatile. Like, you can see the options. It's definitely a GPP play for me. You can see the options, but you're kind of reliant on like rushing touchdowns here or there with Louisville, and then Wake. They just spread the ball around. As far as running back, Christian Beal-Smith, I was kind of excited for him this year, but he's really disappointed me. Even though the stats have been fine. At 6K, I can't get there. He hasn't gone over 100 yards yet this year. That's a problem, and he hasn't really gotten particularly close. They do play 3 backs, so while Beal-Smith is still the leader, Ellison had 13 carries in back-to-back weeks at 4.3K. And then behind him, Christian Turner also had 27 carries over the last 2 games. So if you're really punting at running back, I don't know. This isn't advisable. I'm not advising to do this. But Christian Turner has 27 carries in the last 2 games and has 100 yards in that span. So, sure, he can get a touchdown. Okay. Wake Forest, A.T. Perry and Jakari Roberson, the top 2 guys. I do think the pricing is a little bit flipped. While Perry kind of seems to have taken over the alpha role when I've been watching the games, that's not the target data hasn't really backed that up. Roberson still leads the team with 24 targets, whereas Perry has 21. Jakari Roberson at 5.2K. They keep pricing him way too low. I think I'm going to get back to him. I had a lot of him against FSU, total dud. I did have a decent amount of him last week against Virginia. Kind of a dud, 13 points, and he was really headed for a dud until he had a long reception there in the second half. And he did drop a pass as well. But this is a guy who had a touchdown in I think like 6 straight games. Last year he was pretty much a lock for 12 to 15 targets a game. This year it's not the same. Like I said, this Wake offense, if they don't need to throw the ball, they won't. Do they need to throw the ball in this matchup? Again, I feel like that's up in the air. I don't have a confident answer either way. But Roberson is still too cheap at 5.2K. Perry at 6.5K. It's just hard for me to justify playing him when you have Roberson behind him at that cheap price. Anyone behind those guys, they're kind of rotating. Sorry, I kind of skipped over them. They're kind of rotating. Morin, I wanted to be on this guy in the beginning of the year. I think I even punted him a few times, did nothing. And now he has 10 catches over the last two games and a touchdown to go with 100 yards. So double-digit points in back-to-back games. So Morin at 4.3K, I wish he was cheaper. They're still rotating in Stewart down here at 3.2K. Did nothing the last 2 weeks, but he's on the field a decent amount. Donald Stewart, 3.2K. Okay, USC versus Colorado. USC, minus 7.5 point favorites. Minus 7.5, rather. And Colorado is, over-under is 51. Only Colorado's been a dead under team all year. They have no offense. Not really a team you're going to want to play a lot of. That being said, I hate when USC is on the slate. I hate when USC is on the slate. It's one of these teams I can't figure out. It's like Will Rogers from Mississippi State. I just never get them right. Keaton Slovis 2 years ago, I always say this, he was absolute money. Went to him every week. He was money, as he should be for an air raid offense that throws the ball 40 times a game and has the dangerous targets that they have. He should be money. He hasn't been. He's been bad. This is the second straight year he's been bad. I wish Jackson Dart was healthy. Had surgery on a torn meniscus. He came in for 1 week. Look at that. Those are the stats you should be seeing from a USC quarterback. Even though he lost 2 fumbles, even though he threw 2 picks, look at the rushing upside. Look at that. 4 touchdowns, almost 400 yards passing. If Jackson Dart was healthy, we'd be playing him every single week. Fortunately, he's not. We got to deal with this Slovis guy again, who's just crushing me. Can't make a decision on Slovis. Night slate last week. I knew to play the Beavers. I knew they were going to score some points against USC. My mistake. I ran back Slovis on the stack in every single lineup. He had 49 pass attempts, and look at this garbage he pumped out here. 3 interceptions, negative 15 rushing yards, lost a fumble. I'm not a Keaton Slovis guy, but if he throws the ball 40 times and is this cheap, you have to mention him. You have to mention him. I feel like he's playing scared. It's really tough to watch. I tried to watch the Beaver game and I almost had to avert my eyes when they were on offense. It is tough to watch. He's injury prone. I know people don't like when you say that about players. I'm sorry. He's had a lot of concussions. He's playing through a neck injury. Apparently last year he's playing through an arm injury all year, and that's why he didn't look right. I don't know why he doesn't look right. There's a lot going on. He looks scared, and it should be difficult. It is difficult to be that bad when you have these wide receivers to throw to and throw the ball that much. That being said, I'm probably still going to play some because I'm a sucker for it, and you got to chase volume in fantasy. All right, other than that, Drake London, arguably best wide receiver in college football, has 55 targets over his last 4 games, is an absolute monster. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to pay up there. I'm not sure how much I'm going to get there just because there are some really good quarterbacks on the slate and some decent running backs as well. but he's a monster. He's a monster. All right, played a lot of Taj Washington last week. Just did not get the job done. Has not gotten the job done for a couple weeks now. Talented Memphis transfer. But he's going to be on the field a lot at 4.3K. Gary Bryant at 5.1K is also going to be on the field very fast. Has 17 targets in his last 3 games. Missed the first week's comeback. Looks like their number 2 option at 5.1K. You could do worse. Other than that, behind them, I am monitoring Michael Trigg. Again, I said USC was hard to watch last week. One guy who caught my eye through all that garbage, other than Drake London, was Michael Trigg at 3.3K. So he's a tight end who's going to be splitting snaps. I think he was only on the field for 21 snaps last game. Didn't write that down, going off memory. It looked like they really wanted to throw him the ball. Didn't really look like they wanted to throw the ball to Taj Washington at all. Even when he was open, Slovis didn't want to throw him the ball because that would have required him actually hanging in the pocket and throwing the ball downfield when he was open downfield. But he didn't want to do that. They were targeting Trigg a lot. He didn't really end up with much. But they need a secondary pass catcher to step up. And Michael Trigg looks like a beast. He looks like one of those basketball players playing wide receiver. I don't know if he ever has, but in this air raid offense, splitting him out wide at tight end, it's pretty much wide receiver, right? So if you really need a punt option, I think Trigg has some untapped potential that I think we will see at some point. Are we going to see it this week? Who the hell knows? But at some point we probably will. All right, the running backs are a mess at USC. Looks like they finally stopped rotating them as much as they have been the last 2 years. Ingram got workhorse usage. Too early. Coffee time. Workhorse usage last week. Can we expect that to continue? I don't know. They have an interim coach. Who knows what's going on at USC? But I wouldn't play them. All right, Colorado. Let me just skip over them real quick. Well, okay. I should mention this USC defense. Oregon State absolutely ran the ball all over this team. All over them last week. Oregon State ran the ball 55 times against USC. If you fell asleep and missed this game, if you're on the East Coast and missed this game, yes, I watched the game. I can tell you. They ran the ball 55 times. They embarrassed USC. Oregon State has a way better offense than Colorado, but what does Colorado want to do? They want to run the ball. They might have better success here against USC, so they might not score 3 points like they have been every single week. They're an embarrassment of an offense. Brandon Lewis, their dual threat quarterback, he should have fantasy relevance all the way down at 5K because he looked good at the end of last year, but I think this coaching staff is just a total mess. You can't trust Brandon Lewis until he does something else. Don't play their wide receivers. Jarek Broussard. Like I said, with this USC defense coming off such a bad performance, I would mention Broussard at 5.5K, but I'm a little concerned. There were a lot of bad quotes. So he was a workhorse last year. There were a lot of bad quotes over the offseason about how they wanted to get more guys involved. They just didn't know if Broussard was the guy, which was kind of weird after he's coming off such a successful season where he stepped up for them and was basically their entire offense. But he came out this year, looked like a little bit more the same. They were giving Fontenot some carries, Clayton some carries. And then he gets hurt because he's hurt a lot. And then last week he only had 12 carries, did nothing with them. And Fontenot, they actually gave him 14 carries, and he was more productive with those 14 carries. So now I think we got a little bit of a timeshare on our hands. Now I'm a little bit concerned. Now I don't know who to play, so I probably won't play either. Other than that, Ashad Clayton, one of the most talented running backs they've had back there, recruits in a while, but just hasn't really done much. Did have 7 carries last week. He's stone cold minimum against a team that just got ran all over by Oregon State. I guess if you really need a 3K guy, you could try it, but it's a little crazy. Colorado's third running back. A team that's scoring, what are they scoring, 3 points a game? But I guess I'm crazy because I just mentioned them. All right, Cincinnati, -1.5 against Notre Dame. Over-unders at 51. Yeah, Desmond Ridder. I mentioned him earlier. Tough guy to figure out. Really tough guy to figure out. Has not had those monster rushing games of years past, but is he due for one? I kind of feel like he is due for one. You can't really trust him as a thrower. But he is kind of the team's entire offense. Although now they have Jerome Ford, it's not quite the same. So at 7.5K, for a guy who's always too expensive, and now he's at 7.5K, I don't know, might have some Ridder. He runs a lot. This game's probably going to be low scoring in general. You don't want a ton. ND wants to run the ball. They just haven't been able to do so. I think this is a matchup where they might run the ball more since Cincinnati has such a good secondary. I think they might try to run the ball here. They haven't been able to do it all year, so we'll see. But yeah, everyone's really cheap, so I think you could pick your spots. You don't want a ton, but you can really pick your spots. Even Jerome Ford at 6.8K. He's just been a monster this year. Talented Alabama transfer. He's really a deep play threat running the ball, which you don't say, well, in college, yeah, you could be a deep play threat running the ball. And he is. He's really good. 6.8K, this is probably his toughest matchup of the year. I probably won't have a ton of Ford. Do not play Cincinnati wide receivers. That is a rule here on the show. That being said, for some reason, their tight end, Josh Wiley, didn't even notice this until live right on the show. For some reason, he is stone cold minimum at 3K. This is a talented 4-star kid who was recruited by a bunch of SEC schools, was a beast last year. Should not be 3K, so I will say that. That rule does not apply to their tight ends. All right, Notre Dame, Jack Cohn's probable. Looks like he's going to play, but Buckner's getting some snaps behind him. And Drew Pine looked good last week. I don't think he could play Jack Cohn. Do I think he's too cheap? Yes. This team's been throwing the ball a lot. They've just been giving up on their rushing attack. Like I said, I'm not sure that's the best option here, but it's been happening pretty much every game. So it could happen here as well at 6K. I guess you could do worse. Michael Mayer, the tight end, 5.5K. You have to mention him. He had 2 monster games to start the year. 1 dud against Purdue, and then a decent game last week against a tough Wisconsin defense. I'm not sure Cincinnati has the matchup for Meyer. Not sure I feel confident in saying they don't, but I don't think they do. So Meyer at 5.5K, you could do a lot worse there. Other than that, I wouldn't play their secondary receiving options. Kevin Austin's really stepped up as their best wide receiver. This guy's a stud at 5.7K, but it gets a very tough matchup here against a very good Cincinnati secondary. All right, Kyren Williams is 5K. Kyren Williams is 5K flat. That's a trap. It's probably a trap. Am I going to fall for that trap? Yeah, I probably will in some lineups. I've only set 1 or 2 lineups already. One of them I had Kyren Williams in there, and that was the one thing. You know, you set a lineup, and then you kind of sit on it, you sleep on it, you wait and see who pops up. He was the one I started getting antsy about. I feel like it might be a trap. Has not seen 20 carries yet this year because the O-line sucks. But again, they want to run the ball. If they're able to at all here, they will. He's arguably the second most talented running back on the slate after Bijan. He probably is. I could go look at the running backs, but I think he probably is. And he's 5K. That just tells you how bad this offensive line has been, right? I just feel like it's too cheap. I feel like he's probably about 1,400 too cheap still. So you could play some, but he could have a total dud. Had a dud against Wisconsin last week, but honestly, if you weren't expecting him to have a dud against Wisconsin, you probably shouldn't be playing college DFS, because of course he did. Hasn't gone over 100 yards yet this year, but they've been using him a lot more as a receiver. Didn't have any catches last week, but he's been pretty much a lock over 20 points. Other than when you play Wisconsin, which I feel like you just got to throw Wisconsin results out the window because they're that good defensively. Yeah, maybe I'll be a sucker for some Kyren Williams. Not going to feel great about it, but he's too cheap. All right, almost there, folks. 5 more games. All right, Ole Miss, Alabama. It's going to be the most popular game on the slate. It's going to be a great game, hopefully. Hopefully Alabama doesn't just blow them out. Ole Miss plus 14.5. Yes, I did take some of that. I'm a believer in this Ole Miss team. Alabama, or the over-under set at 79.5. Over-under is damn near 80. So this is going to be the most popular game on the slate. It is. It's hard to know where to start with this game. Let's start with Ole Miss. So basically, Matt Corral's the Heisman favorite. If you were listening to anyone you should be listening to on Twitter, they could have gotten you a nice juicy number for those Heisman odds. Now it's at plus 150. So hopefully you listen to him over the summer. He's a beast. He's a dual threat. This guy's a monster at 9.2K. Obviously gets his toughest matchup of the year here, but it's Matt Corral. Yeah, I'm going to play some Matt Corral. He's going to be really, really expensive, but if you could go with some of the cheaper options, especially on FanDuel, you should stack Corral and Bryce Young. Probably everyone's going to do it, but you could get different elsewhere. Matt Corral's a fine option because he's Matt Corral. All right, they ran the ball down Alabama's throat last year. They scored 48 points. You've probably been hearing all this hoopla, all this BS about how, yeah, they scored 48 on Bama last year, but I got some insider information that said Lane Kiffin had some insider information, let's call it, about what Alabama was going to be running. I don't know why there's always so much bullshit out there. Just analyze the game. They ran the ball down their throats. They scored 48 points. If this Alabama defense full of 5-star, 300-pound kids that all run a 4.5. If they can't stop little Jarian Ely, baseball player, from running all over them, from Ole Miss, from scoring 48 points, do better. Do better in your analysis as well. Anyway, Jarian Ely's too expensive at 6.1K. Parrish and Connor are also going to get carries behind him. Parrish is at 4.3K. Tough for me to get there, but in this high over-under, anyone could stumble into 3 touchdowns. So yeah, Ely, like I said, they ran the ball all over him last year. It could happen here. I did not think this Alabama defense looked as good as I was expecting them to. They're supposed to have one of the best front sevens in all of college football. I thought they did going into the year. And yeah, that Florida game scared me off. Florida hasn't been able to run the ball in years. They look better at it this year. And they were better on the line of scrimmage than Alabama. That shocked me. Florida also hasn't been good in the O-line in a couple of years. And they were better than Alabama. That shocked me. All right, Snoop Connor. 3.9K. Yeah, I usually would play a lot of him, but he just has done nothing. Looks like he's losing out carries to Parrish. All right, wide receivers. Yeah, Dylan Drummond's the top guy. Has 27 targets. He's playing in the slot. That's the high profitable role we saw Elijah Moore in last year. Is he Elijah Moore? No, probably not. But he's by far the safest option you're going to get. Probably going to be the most popular option out wide. Has the most PPR option. Has over 30 points in 2 games and 24 in the other game. Jonathan Mingo out wide, he's kind of a more boom or bust guy. He's had 2 booms the last 2 weeks at 6.1K. Does have 25 targets on the year, so right there behind Drummond. These are clearly your top 2 guys, and Mingo's cheaper. So I think a lot of analysts are probably going to tell you Mingo's the better play at 6.1K, and maybe he is using that logic. They're very similar target-wise, and one of them's 14K cheaper, so maybe. But I think everyone's going to be using that logic. I think Mingo might be a little popular. I still think he's fine, right? Anytime you have an over-under at 80, I'm not going to tell you no on any player. Braylon Sanders is 4.8K. I think that's a little too cheap. It seems like a little bit of an overreaction. I want to say he started the year over 8K on the first slate on Labor Day against Louisville. Maybe that was a showdown. I don't know. I think he started over 8K, and now all of a sudden he's all the way down here. Braylon Sanders is too cheap at 4.8K. 4.8K. Sorry, it's early. Almost getting to 6 o'clock. Almost waking up. At 4.8K, he's not too bad. Other than that, I was expecting some big things out of the tight end this year because they used the tight end. That was what they did against BAMA last year. They just ran the ball and then threw the ball to the tight end, Kenny Yeboah. Got him drafted. But Casey Kelly, I know he was injured to start the year. They said he was going to play against Tulane. Didn't see him out there. I don't know. He could be kind of like a secret weapon sort of thing. Not saying I got insider information here. But at 3.4K, they could use him. I wouldn't be shocked if he just all of a sudden had 50 yards and touchdown out of nowhere. Also, wouldn't be shocked if he did nothing like he's done all year long. So maybe a cheap pump play. All right, Alabama. You probably know Alabama by now. I won't spend too long on him. Bryce Young's 10K, most expensive quarterback on the slate. If you can get there, sure, he's fine. Obviously, he's fine. This Ole Miss defense was absolutely awful last year. They have looked better this year, but haven't been tested too much. Alabama's offense clearly has taken a step back from last year, but that's to be expected because they were otherworldly last year. Bryce Young's stats have looked fine, but I am a little worried. He's not throwing the ball downfield at all. I don't know. I can't confidently tell you what the reason is. If they don't have faith in the O-line, if it's a Bryce Young mental thing, if it's just a game planning thing, if they've been not opening up the playbook, saving it for a game like this. I can't confidently tell you. So I'm just going to be monitoring this one. I don't think we have enough data to confidently say either way what's going on there. But yeah, it's a little bit of a problem. At 10K, you want a quarterback that's going to throw the ball down the field, and he hasn't been. It's a little bit of a dual threat, though. All right, the running back room is a mess. Looks like Brian Robinson, he's been the top guy. Says he's practiced this week. Sounds like he's going to play, so he's probably the guy at 6.5K. They're probably going to split some carries. Roydell Williams at 4.5K, Jason McClellan at 5.9K. They're just going to be eaten into each other's workload in this one. So not super confident in anybody. I wish the wide receivers were a little bit cheaper here. Jamison Williams, 7.7K. John Mechie, 7.1K. First thing you have to notice is that Mechie is out-targeting Williams, 29-22 on the season. But get this. Get this average depth of target. They're ADOT on the year. Jamison Williams, 16.5 ADOT. Pretty damn good. So when they're throwing the ball downfield, which is almost never, it's to Williams. Very dangerous, speedy, deep threat. So 16.5 ADOT for Jamison. 5.9 for Mechie. John Mechie has a 5.9 ADOT. That's what I said. When they're not throwing the ball downfield, they're throwing it short to Mechie. A lot of screen game work, a lot of short work. It's not great. All right, the secondary option. So Leitu's been a pretty good tight end. He's been pretty trustworthy at 4.8K. I think he's fine. I think the cheap guy I have the most ownership interest this week is Jaleel Billingsley. Is he going to be popular? Probably. He was in the doghouse to start the year. Nick Saban did not let up on any chance to throw him under the bus and say he wasn't practicing hard or whatever. Every single day it was something else about Billingsley. But it looks like his motivational tactics have worked. So after not playing really the first 2 weeks, now has a touchdown in back-to-back games. Had 105 yards and a touchdown against Southern Miss last week. Does that mean he's out of the doghouse? Probably. That game was a blowout, so it's hard to tell what his snap usage is going to be here. But going into the year, it really seemed like they need pass catchers to step up. Now that MICH hasn't really been the guy I thought he was going to be. Williams has been pretty dangerous, so maybe there's not a ton of room. Maybe Williams has taken that. But there still is room for somebody to step up, and Billingsley at 3.6K is too cheap. All right. Oregon versus Stanford. This could be a sneaky game. Might go to this game. Haven't decided. Going to be pretty much a home game for Oregon here because Stanford fans don't show up. Stanford doesn't have fans to show up, and Oregon travels pretty well. Oregon's -8, Stanford's 57.5, or sorry, over/under's 57.5. It could be sneaky. I'm not really looking at the Oregon passing game until they show me more. Stanford plays at a snail's pace. They are last in the country in plays per game by a full 3 plays per game. They're only snapping the ball 53.8 times. Why are they doing that? Because, well, for one, it's David Shaw. He's a dinosaur, and he hates analytics, and he probably hates me for being a young kid who's talking about stats. Got distracted there. No, they play at a snail's pace mainly because their defense is dreadful. Stanford has a dreadful defense, especially the front seven. They're allowing 212 rushing yards per game. It's one of the worst in the country, and they'd be allowing a lot more if they weren't slowing the game down. But they are slowing the game down, and that makes it tough to stack guys against them because there just won't be that many plays in the game. Oregon also doesn't play at a very high tempo. We've seen Oregon in the past, when they get a lead, they just kind of sit on it. I could see that happening here. It could be 14-0 in the first quarter. It could be 21-0 in the first quarter. Not saying it will be. Oregon's not really a team that looks to run the score up or anything. And then just slowly but surely, it's just kind of the final score all of a sudden is like 28-20. And you're like, what happened there? I thought it was Anthony Brown had 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. What happened? So at 8K, Anthony Brown's okay, but I think he's too expensive. None of the receiving options, they just rotate guys way too much. They have a pretty good receiving core, actually, but just rotating guys too much. Troy Franklin's one of the best freshman receivers in the country. He's a stud, but just hasn't really seen enough work at 3.4K. So no pass catchers for me. I think CJ Verdell's okay at 7K. He's one of the most difficult running backs to monitor. And again, as a guy who roots for Oregon here, is that green thrown off my hat? Sorry, my hat's all speckly. Sorry about that. It happens. He's one of the most difficult guys to read. And as a guy who monitors Oregon, I still can't read him. Like he went absolutely ballistic against Ohio State, and the other games have been relatively disappointing. And he's just been a boomer bust guy pretty much his entire career. But at 7K, I mean, like I said, the Stanford rush defense is absolutely dreadful. If you're looking to go cheaper in the backfield, I think you could play Travis Dye. I mean, he's been double digits. I don't know what the workload will be if they do get out to an early lead, which I think is possible. Maybe he gets more usage, but the usage is not safe for Travis Dye at 5.3K. So I don't think I'll have a lot of ownership of anyone on Oregon, but their running backs are where I would look. But yeah, that's the issue with the rushing offense. They split it 3 ways because Anthony Brown runs, Verdell runs. It seems like they want to keep Verdell healthy. They've been doing this as a second straight year now. They don't really run him 20 times a game unless they have to. And then you have Dye back there as well. If Vanderbilt ran all over this team, Oregon can run all over this team, is what I'll say. All right. Stanford, Tanner McKee. Yeah. Mormon, he was on a mission. He was one of the top-rated quarterbacks coming out of high school a number of years ago, and then everybody forgot who he was when he was on his mission. Comes back, is clearly the better quarterback, takes David Shaw a while to figure that out, then he starts him, and Tanner McKee just runs away with the job. He's really good. Like I said, the volume isn't great, but this is a decent passing offense at 6.5K. I think McKee is too cheap on a slate where it's pretty tough to find salary relief, especially up at quarterback. If you're not paying up for those stud quarterbacks, which I think I'm going to do a lot, McKee is where I would look as a cheaper option at 6.5K. He's been very good. As far as the stacking options, so first off, Stanford, like everybody in this team is hurt. It's really hard to figure out what's going on. I think now like their best or second best O-lineman is going to be hurt. Their entire running back room is hurt. Apparently Austin Jones is going to come back, but he's been dreadful at 5.7K anyway. They were down to I think one scholarship running back last week. Smith's still going to be out, but Filkins and Jones were out last week. So Nathaniel Peat played every single snap against UCLA. So if you see that when you're snap counting, take it with some context. This week it's such a mess. Don't play their running backs. I think Bryson Tremaine's their number one guy, but it's close between him and Higgins. Tremaine, I think, is the best red zone threat, kind of a bigger, more lumbering guy. J.J. Arcega-Whitesides, he has had a touchdown every single game. Can we expect that to continue? I'm not sure the target data supports that, but the historical data from Stanford kind of does. Elijah Higgins probably has more yardage upside, had 100 yards last week against UCLA and a touchdown, so I guess you could argue GPPs. Higgins probably has the higher upside. Anyone aside from that, it sounds like Urosic, their tight end's going to play. Stanford tight ends, not quite what they have been in the past, but anytime you see a Stanford tight end that's too cheap, probably because of the injury, but now he's probable to play. Urosic at 3.2K, I guess he could do worse as a punt. All right, 3 more. Texas Tech, West Virginia. Over-under 55.5. Texas Tech, 7.5 point underdogs. Why is this game on the slate? I don't know. I don't really think I'm going to play a ton of it. West Virginia has a very good defense. If they were able to shut down Oklahoma, I'm not really sure why we would expect a ton of points here from Texas Tech, who is on their backup quarterback in Henry Colombi. It's an okay over-under. I guess you could play Colombi. He does run a little bit, but I don't know. Not feeling confident. The pass catchers, if I'm playing anything on Texas Tech, that's what I would play. Ezu Kanma has 35 targets. He's by far their leader. He's at 6.3K. Little pricey against this good defense. And then Geiger behind him, the Troy transfer at 5.8K. He's been really solid. Has 100 yards in back-to-back games. And he's a pretty good player as well. 20 DraftKings points in back-to-back weeks. I wouldn't play anyone behind him. Haven't seen enough usage yet this year. I do not play Texas Tech running backs. I do not encourage you to do that. If Taj Brooks is out, like it sounds like he will be, Sir Roderick Thompson would be the guy behind him. Sir Roderick, very boom or busts. I don't really see how you're forecasting a boom here against West Virginia, but if you're playing GPPs, 150, maybe throw one in there since he's probably a little too cheap. All right, Texas Tech's defense, absolutely awful. They gave up 70 points a week ago to Texas, so you have to look at West Virginia. Jared Dagey throws the ball a lot, does not throw the ball a lot well. I guess he hasn't thrown the ball very much in the last couple weeks. Just hasn't been great. So 6.2K is probably a little too cheap against this bad defense that just gave up 6 touchdowns to Casey Thompson. All right, the wide receivers are a little bit of a mess. So Winston Wright has 26 targets. Ford Wheaton has 25. And then Sam James has 22. So right there you can see the pricing's a little off. I guess you could play a one-off from any of these receivers. Ford Wheaton did drop a touchdown last week against Oklahoma. Probably would have changed trajectory of that game, but overall I thought it looked pretty good. Winston Wright has been one of the most dangerous kick returners in college football, and now he's getting a decent amount of targets. If I played anybody, that's probably where I would look, but not a lot of ownership for me. All right, so I guess the only reason why this is on the slate is so that they can give us Letty Brown at 6.9K against Texas Tech. Yeah, I'm going to play some Letty Brown. He's too cheap yet again. He gets workhorse usage, and while this isn't a great rushing offense, you don't need to be to score points against Texas Tech. So Letty Brown at 6.9K, it almost feels too good to be true. All right, Oklahoma versus Kansas State. You already know what the deal is with Oklahoma. So we still have Oklahoma and Ohio State as the last 2 teams on the slate. You kind of know what the deal is with both these teams. Lincoln Riley offense, but they just have not been getting the job done. Fans were chanting to bench Spencer Rattler last week, which was pretty, I don't know, not a big fan of that, personally, in my opinion. I think you stick by your guy. But Caleb Williams, I don't know. Spencer Rattler hasn't looked good, but he's still the quarterback. Has not gotten the job done at 8.8K. It's going to be difficult to play him here. Kansas State defense is okay. I would assume Oklahoma's defense is going to get off the schneid at some point. I know it's easy to say, oh, they're just going to figure it out. But I really do think they're going to figure it out. Like, West Virginia has a good defense. Okay, they hadn't figured it out against West Virginia. Could they figure it out against Kansas State? Yeah, sure they could. They're going to be looking for revenge for last year. Could they get it here in a big way? I would lean towards that, then say this would be a close game. Have I bet Oklahoma minus 10.5? No, I haven't. Because I do not feel confident in the offense right now. But if they exploded here for 40 points, I would not be surprised at all. It's coming at some point. This is Lincoln Riley. They're too talented. The offensive explosion is coming at some point. Am I banking on it? No. But it could happen. GPPs, it could happen. All right, Eric Gray seems to have taken over the RB1 role. Now he's out touching Brooks. Brooks was out touching him earlier in the year. It's a little bit volatile. They haven't been able to run the ball very well this year. And Kansas State has a pretty good rush defense. They are allowing only 75 rushing yards per game on 2.4 yards per carry. So yeah, sounds pretty good. They haven't played that many good teams. One of them was Stanford. Yikes. They did play Oklahoma State last week, and Jalen Warren, their running back, did take 27 carries for 123 yards. So you can move the ball against them, but when you are splitting carries in the backfield, it makes it a little difficult. I've tried playing Gray as a cheap option a few weeks, and it hasn't panned out. It's probably going to the week I don't play him. This is probably going to be the week I don't play him. And is it going to be the week that it pans out? I don't know, man. Tough to trust this Oklahoma team right now. But you shouldn't treat it off 4 weeks of data. You should more look historically. Given what we've seen from Lincoln Riley and given the talent, historically, they're going to figure it out eventually. Okay. Wide receivers. Hazelwood has been on the field the most. He leads the team with 25 targets. Mario Williams at 5K has 21 targets. Michael Woods, 5.3K, has 21 targets as well. And then Marvin Mims, supposed to be the leader going into the year. Thank God I faded him in season long. Although I say that now. Now he's going to bust out in a crazy way. He only has 13 targets this year. Marvin Mims, it's the total opposite of last year. Last year he was almost never on the field, but when he was running routes. And when he was running routes, he was catching touchdowns. He had 9 touchdowns as a freshman, despite almost never being on the field. Now he's on the field a decent amount, and he's not getting targeted, and he's not doing squat. That being said, he had 9 touchdowns last year as a freshman. He has 0 so far this year. He's going to get some touchdowns this year eventually at 4.8K. Again, it's a total GPP play. It's totally not safe. The only logic here is he was really talented. He's really good. He has Spencer Rattler as his quarterback. He has Lincoln Riley as his coach. And he's 4.8K, which is way too cheap. Which actually, that's a lot of logic point his way. So, yeah, I guess out of anyone, Mims is interesting. Mario Williams, they finally raised his price at 5K. I think it's Oklahoma offense. Any of these guys are fine. I think they're kind of priced in the right order. I guess Woods would be too expensive. But Mims is where I would look. Other than that, Stogner, their tight end, 3.7K. Caught a touchdown last week and still only had 7.5 points. It was a 5-yard touchdown reception. 1 catch on the week. So not super trustworthy there. All right. Kansas State's quarterbacks, man, they're a mess. Yeah, Will Howard. I love to make fun of Will Howard. But now he's splitting time with Jaron Lewis. Jaron Lewis looked like the better option. But Oklahoma's defense is really good. I do think they're really good. And I don't think Kansas State's going to score the ball all that much. I think I'm going to talk myself into an Oklahoma bet here, which is tough to do after having watched that whole West Virginia game. But I just don't see it for Kansas State. Their offense is not great. Oklahoma, what are we expecting the final score to be here? Unless we think Oklahoma scores 24 points. Which even if they do, is Oklahoma going to get 35? Probably. Yeah, I just don't really see it. But again, weird things happen when these two teams play each other, kind of like the TCU-Texas game. So, who knows? But anyway, yeah, don't play their wide receivers. I don't know why you would do that. Only guy you can look at would be Deuce Vaughn, their running back. Diminutive? Is that how you say that word? Diminutive? That's probably the most used adjective to describe Deuce Vaughn. Some other adjectives. Very dangerous, very electric. He has over 20 points in every game so far this year. They use him a lot as a receiver. They also use him as a rusher. In a game where I don't think they're going to score a lot of points, I'd prefer to go to the guys like Letty Brown in that same range where I do think Letty Brown's going to score points against a terrible Texas Tech defense. But Deuce Vaughn's a stud. 7.2K. He's a stud. I faded him more than I probably should have in his career is what I'll say. So am I going to fade him here? Probably. Is he going to come back to bite me again? I hope not. All right, Oklahoma State, minus 15 against Rutgers, also considering an Oklahoma State. I guess I'm just a mush better taking these favorites, but, I mean, Ohio State's going to figure it out eventually. I feel like Rutgers they've kind of had their day in the betting window so far. They've been very profitable for bettors, but they're just not that good yet. And I get Greg Schiano was a big upgrade for them. I get they've been recruiting well. I get they have a big quarterback coming in, but he's not playing yet, folks, and as of right now, this is still a team that allowed 32 points per game last year. Have they been better this year? Yes. Are they better this year? Yes. Are they 2 touchdowns worse than Ohio State? I think so. But anyway, I haven't bet it yet. May not. Okay, so we had CJ Stroud last week. Didn't play. Kind of out of nowhere. And somebody calling it Stroudpocalypse on Twitter. Shout out whoever that was. That was pretty funny. But CJ Stroud should be back this week. Does anyone else find it a little funny that immediately after that game, immediately they start practicing on Monday, and now all of a sudden CJ Stroud looks fine, looks great, looks ready to play. It was a little funny. They just didn't play him last week because they were playing Akron. Apparently, some guys went and dug through the tape. You go back to the Oregon game, CJ Stroud's going like this, rolling his shoulder. His shoulder just hadn't been feeling well. Something's going on with Stroud. He's not fully healthy, and he looked pretty bad the next week after against whoever they were playing. So something is probably going on. I think it was Tulsa. So something probably is going on with CJ Stroud. I think it is good they gave him a week off. Again, this Rutgers defense has been pretty good this year, but they did allow 32 points per game last year. So I might talk myself into some Stroud. The downside's obviously he's not healthy. But yeah, he could have played last week. They're just playing Akron. Akron is an embarrassment to the sport of football. So why would you play your injured quarterback against Akron? They just wanted to rest him. It was a good call. I would have done the same. Okay, wide receivers here. You guys already know Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson by now. Garrett Wilson's actually out-targeting Olave 39-30 on the year. We've been playing Wilson when he's been cheaper than Olave. Wilson's been too cheap all year. He's been pretty good. He's been very good to us, actually. He's getting up there, 6.9K. It's getting close. I'm not sure if the out-targeting him is going to continue, but I will say, I mean, they have a new quarterback. Sometimes quarterbacks just like certain targets better than others. Maybe he likes him more than Olave, just like Fields liked Olave slightly more than Wilson. But it's tough to say with any confidence. All right, Jackson Smith and Jiba has 21 targets on the year. This guy's a stud at 5.9K. A little too expensive. He's more expensive than guys like Roberson, Meyer, Whittington, guys I would like in that range. But you've already seen he has 2 blow-up games already this year. Could he have another blow-up game? Of course, they're playing Rutgers. It could happen. Am I going to rely on it to happen? Probably not. I probably won't have a ton. All right, other than that, okay, the running back room. Whew. I feel like this could sway a lot of what I do on the slate. I haven't totally figured out what I'm going to do here. I think Trayvon Henderson at 6.6K is probably going to be in a lot of my lineups. I also feel like he could be a little bit of a trap. He's a freshman. He's extremely dangerous. I do think he's going to be their RB1 going forward. And they're playing Rutgers. They're favored by 2 touchdowns, over-under at 58.5. So he's projected to have a pretty good game here. And he's too cheap at 6.6K. So I will have some. As far as how much, I haven't decided. I'm a little nervous with Mayan Williams coming back. Mayan Williams was the RB1 just a few weeks ago. I do think he is going to split carries with Henderson. Master Teague, I don't think he's going to get carries when they're not playing Akron. I think they've shown that. It's going to be Williams and Henderson. Maybe Teague gets in for a goal line. He might be a vulture. Master Teague might be a goal line vulture, so that's another concern. But I think Mayan Williams is going to split some carries here. At 4.7K, I'm not sure he's not cheap enough for me to consider him, but he is at least enough of a deterrent that I'm not going to be fully owned on Henderson because we don't know how that backfield's going to shake out. Do I think Henderson's going to be the most productive back going forward? Yes. Do I think Henderson's going to get 20 carries a game? Not really. I don't think so. I mean, if Stroud really isn't healthy, maybe they are going to rely more on that run game. It's a volatile situation, but it's Ohio State. You have to have some ownership. Noah Vedral sucks at quarterback, even though Ohio State has not had a good defense. Vedral, he's not good. I'm not playing him. Bo Melton at 4.9K. I do think he's too cheap. He has 35 targets on the year. This guy is a really good, really talented player. They use him short. They don't throw the ball deep to him all that often, which is a concern. But he's been pretty consistent other than the Michigan game. He's had over double digits in each of his games. I think he's okay. I could get there. Anyone behind them, I probably wouldn't be playing. Aaron Cruikshank does get a lot of targets. Never really does all that much with him. If you need a cheap punt at 3.4K, he'll probably get you 5 points. Might get you 10 points. Other than that, I'm not playing the running backs. Isaiah Pacheco gets the work. Aaron Young gets some behind him. I guess he had over 100 yards versus Michigan. That's actually pretty darn good. That actually makes me a little more confident in Malusi. He's had a better year than I've realized. Pacheco's actually pretty good. But 2-score underdogs. There are better options out there, in my opinion. All right. That wraps up the slate. Again, haven't really figured out exactly my lineup selection yet. This is just a basic overview. Honestly, this video helps me set my lineups because I go over information I otherwise might just kind of gloss over. So we'll see. But there's obviously some really good expensive quarterbacks. I think the mid-range quarterback's probably going to make or break my week, and I haven't really figured out what to do with it yet. The Ritters, the Hartmans, the Basilaks, maybe even JT Daniels, Keaton Slovis. He's always make or break in my week, and he's been breaking it for about 2 straight years now. So we'll see. The wide receivers, I do kind of like this mid-range with, even Burks. Maybe I don't think I'm going to play much Burks, but Burks, Whittington, Meyer, Burton, Roberson, those kind of guys, even Gary Bryant. You're just getting a lot of pretty good options at 5K. In an expensive slate, there's a lot of expensive quarterbacks, expensive running backs. Probably paying down at wide receiver is the way to go. But the wide receivers aren't very expensive, so you could say maybe you could pay up because you can afford multiple wide receivers. So we'll see. A lot of expensive running backs. I think we can pretty easily cross some of these guys off the list. I'm crossing off Corum. I'm not going to play a ton of Evans or Vaughn, but they're doable. I think that 6K range, I played a lot in that range last week. I might go back this week with guys like Malusi and Henderson. We will see. We'll see, yeah. But obviously, there's a lot of high over-unders on this slate. It's going to be tough. There's some pretty good game stacks. Ole Miss, Alabama is going to be the most popular. Usually, I say don't worry too much about ownership in college football because it's all over the place. It's still enough of a niche product where it's just kind of haywire. You can't predict it very well. Just go with what works. But you can kind of see where guys are going to be leaning this week, right? Like Ole Miss, Alabama is going to be really, really popular is what I'll say. Other than that, contest selection is the most important thing. Find what contest works for you. I've had good success in the single entry, kind of smaller tournaments, but everybody's different. I also will say, don't really go in with a ton of confidence if you're in a 150 entry max and you're only playing one or two lineups because you are just at a total mathematic disadvantage. There are sharks or guys who are getting good information playing 150 lineups with good information. You may have good information, have one or two lineups, but you're just at a disadvantage. Do I still do that every now and then? Of course I do, because I see 50K to first and I say, sure, I could do that. But you're just at a disadvantage. So find whatever your advantage is, whether it's 50-50 catch, just find your advantage and then play it. One more thing I will say, I do think that single entry, kind of the mid-range, so not the cheapest lineups and not the really expensive lineups, I do think that's probably the sharpest market because that's where you get people who are pretty named sharp and they feel confident about their entry, but they're not just like rich dudes. They're not just accountants or real estate, whatever. They're successful in other parts of life, not necessarily DFS. And those guys just, like, you'll see some bad lineups in some of the higher entry ones. So I would just say, like, be mindful every single week of the tournaments that you enter. And obviously there's going to be variance week to week. So if you're not successful one week, that doesn't mean you shouldn't play that again. But just over time, really start tracking what you have success in and then stick to that success. For me, I've mostly had that success with the single entry mid-range. Even though that is a sharper market, that's just where I have success. That's naturally what I'm inclined to do. I don't play a ton of 150 lineups. I've just stopped doing that less because that's just not what I'm doing nowadays. I don't like using optimizers. Personally, don't like doing that. If you are using an optimizer, you are using 150, go for it, do it, find what works for you. If that's what works, keep doing it, go win some money. Other than that, no PrizePicks right now because it's early in the week. Actually, I said I was going to share what I have for Thursday and Friday, so let me share that real quick. I do want to get out a PrizePicks video this week. I should be recording that either tonight or Friday. Probably the lines haven't really dropped last I checked. Of course, when I say that, they're probably out this morning. Again, it's pretty damn early here. But I will try to do a quick video on Friday, and I'll also share that on Twitter. It's at YonkersCFB. Go ahead and use that link in the bottom if you want a $100 deposit match. All right, so here's what I have. Probably by the time you're watching this, it might be too late. But here's what I have locked up. So I usually do the 5 entries because I've had good luck on that. So you can go from 2 to 5 entries, 2 to 5 picks per entry. I usually do 5. You can just kind of pick and choose whatever works. If you're listening to this on a Friday, maybe use the Friday ones, and obviously the Thursday ones won't be available. So for tonight, I have Billy Kemp, wide receiver from Virginia. They actually have him listed as a running back, but wide receiver over 5.5 receptions. Played that last week, hit pretty easily. Gets a lot of short route workage, over 5.5 receptions. I have Gunnar Romney, over 59.5 receiving yards. I like most of his overs. He's a BYU wide receiver. When he's healthy, he's been very productive. Just hasn't been healthy. Now it looks like he is. James Cook, under 38.5 rushing yards. I play James Cook's unders whenever I can. I think he went over a week or two ago, and it burned me, but listen, he's more of a scat back. Dalvin Cook's brother, more of a scat back. Doesn't run the ball a lot, and this is a game against a good Arkansas defense that I see being low scoring. I have Talia Tagovailoa, Tua's brother. I guess I'm just going under on the brothers. Under 281.5 passing yards. Sure, he's looked good. He's played some terrible defenses. Now he plays Iowa. Iowa's not a terrible defense. I also took under, this is the one I have locked up in the most, Tayon Fleet Davis, Maryland running back. I have under 16 fantasy points. Just doesn't get a ton of rushing usage, and now he's playing a very good Iowa defense. I don't see him getting to 16 fantasy points. All right, other than that, we have been going for a very long time here. Thank you all for listening. Good luck this week. And yeah, thanks for supporting the show. And if you like, subscribe, comment, whatever you got for me, I appreciate it. Best of luck this week.